Denim Couch Podcast. Ooh, whoa, ooh, whoa.
The 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s with Steph with an F.
Hi guys, welcome to the Denim Couch Podcast, where we chill on this denim couch and talk about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Stephanie Tanner. Welcome. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Tanner with the Denim Couch Podcast. And today's episode is with Karyl Jensen. When I think of Karyl, I just think she is so funny. She is hilarious. And I've known her a few years, and I distinctly remember her because she is very sweet and she just has a great sense of humor. And we've been Facebook friends, of course, for a while now. And she never fails to post the funniest things. I think she's the one that gives me the biggest laugh out of anyone on Facebook. And that is saying something. My favorite is this picture of Karyl that is captioned, "Proof that Barb survived and raised a family." And some of you may or may not get this reference. It is from Stranger Things. I will post the photo. I got Karyl's permission with this caption so that you all can enjoy it. So anyways, Karyl is so fun to talk to. Probably I could talk to her for hours. And she willingly let me interview her about the 70s and what that experience was like for her. I love how each of my guests has a very different experience, and you can see how their personalities differ and what their characteristics are and what's important to them. And it's very interesting, and I love it. And before we begin, one thing I've been thinking about this week, there's been so many things to think about during this quarantine period. It's been interesting because I think my opinion of technology has changed a little bit during this time. As you may know, if you've listened to a few of these episodes, I started out doing this podcast to understand what it was like to live back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I wanted to compare that to now and see if there were differences in happiness based on the difference of technology. Now we have a lot more technology than we had back in the day. And I believe that it disrupts my life in a negative way often. And so I will not lie that sometimes I wish I lived back in a more simpler time where I could focus on family and slow down and enjoy simpler things in simpler times and not be bombarded by 5,000 messages from people I follow or things I follow. And the interesting thing is I feel like this quarantine or this virus has kind of flip-flopped everything and the situations that we previously had. And so now I am, in fact, grateful for technology with where we're at today, because right now that is the only thing that keeps us connected. The key that I've learned, I think, up to this point is that technology itself is not always negative, but it's what type of messages and what type of things you're following and allowing into your life each day, because it can be overwhelming and exhausting seeing so many messages, especially when people are pushing politics or pushing an agenda or just pushing the best of themselves, and it's not real life. Ultimately, what I think is important is connecting with people through technology, especially at this time. It's been such a blessing for so many people. It's been amazing to be connected and to talk with people and make sure they are doing well. Over the last couple months of doing this, I've been able to focus more on other things, and what's on my social media is very specific to what I want to see, and I make sure it doesn't overwhelm me. We all need connection, and I am grateful for technology in that sense, and grateful for where we're at today and that we're able to do that and able to reach out and not feel as lonely as we might have been without it. All right, let's dive in. And my first question for you is, can you tell me a little bit more about your name?
I have an ordinary name with a really unusual spelling. I have only in my whole life twice met somebody who spelled it like this. It's Karyl for Karyl. Plenty of Carols out there, but my first name is very unusual spelling. My mom found it in a magazine somewhere. So I got called Karyl a lot. You know, first day of high school, teachers just reading it from a lesson. I called Karyl. I got called Karyl at graduation, high school graduation. And so when I got to college graduation, I wrote him a note how to pronounce my name.
What was life like back in the 70s?
Well, 70s took me all the way from 9th grade to early motherhood. You know, 9th grade, high school, college. I did graduate from college just before my first baby was born. Aww. And I wound up with 2 of them by the time the 70s are over. So yeah, I just went the whole spectrum. Well, I grew up in a big family. My parents collected children. Seriously, they collected children. I have 6 brothers and 2 sisters, so there are 9 kids altogether, and we were never all home at the same time. My oldest brother came from my dad's first marriage, and that's a long, sad story, but then my parents got married and had 5, and then they got a foster care license and wound up adopting 3 of the foster children. So we were just in and out all the time, and this house just wasn't very big, especially if you go back and look at it now. We had 1 bathroom, 1 phone. It hung on the wall in the dining room, and only 1 television, no cable, and it just didn't seem strange. If I went to a house that had 2 bathrooms, I just thought they were being way too fancy. I wasn't raised free range. You know, I raised my kids free range. I let them go do whatever they wanted, and they say they liked it. And my mom did not allow that. She wasn't a helicopter parent, but she was just somebody who must be obeyed. Okay. She who must be obeyed. That's my mom. And she would tell you that herself if she was still here. So, that I was sheltered and stayed close to home, and I was a very obedient daughter. I did a lot of babysitting, walked a lot of places, helped at home. I was just boring, like I told you. I'm a wallflower's wallflower. My brothers, who like to claim that they are the black sheep of the family, have 2 of them, and they call me the white sheep of the family. Like just hanging out around the house, and back then that's what everybody did. It wasn't like I went to dancing lessons or piano lessons or anything. We were just at home. All that just wasn't in the budget, and it didn't seem weird to me. And I loved babies, and at the time there were a lot of newborn babies being placed for adoption. These days, babies born to single mothers or teenage mothers, they tend to keep them. They don't tend to put them up for adoption, but at the time there were a lot of newborns being placed for adoption, so there was always a baby to play with. So that was they had a foster care license, and there were a lot of babies that came and went all the time. Sometimes, we might have 2 or 3 of them at a time. There were just a lot of out of wedlock, as they used to say, teenage moms placing their babies for adoption. And so they would come to our house for a month or 2 until they were adopted out. And then there was one, I think I was 9th grade. They started when I was in the 7th grade. And in the 9th grade, there was one that came along. He wound up staying a little longer, and my mom just fell in love with him and they adopted him. And then a few years later, there was another 2. They were actually brother and sister, and we wound up adopting them too, because it took a long time to get all of that stuff dealt with. So I tell people I grew up in a foster home.
What did you do for fun in the 70s?
For me, it was family and church. School, it's high school football games are always kind of fun, and my mom would let me go do that, and you'd meet your friends there. And the Saturday night dances from church were fun. I had my first couple of boyfriends from there, and they went to another high school, and so if we went to the games, I could meet up at the game. That was kind of fun. But I really liked girls' camp. I loved girls' camp. It was another church thing, and then our family would go camping every summer. My dad bought a tent. I was like in 8th grade, and my mom was so mad at him for spending that much money on a tent. And we still have it. I gave it to my son a few years ago, and it's still hanging around the family. And we always went to the same spot. It was just a Forest Service campground up the road from Crouch, Idaho, if you know where that is. And so my grandparents would come with us when I was little. My dad's parents went with us a few times, but after a while it was just us kids, and my mom hated camping. So when we went, my dad did all the cooking and stuff. He had to be really nice to her so she'd go, because she did not want to go. And then we still have the griddle. It's another cast iron thing that's looks like a big round plate with a handle on it. My dad would make pancakes on that. I still have that. If you knew anything about me, you'd probably know that I've always been a sewer. Well, I started sewing like 7th grade. So I used to do commercial sewing for a living. I had a career with that for like 20 years, and then that job went away. I sewed for my kids, sewed for myself. I was kind of the lead sewer in the family because I got really good at putting in zippers, and so my mom or my sister would make it something I'd have to put in the zipper for them, And I was a little more adventuresome with sewing than they were. But then in 1976, the bicentennial year, I wanted to make these certain costumes for people, because just for the experience of making them. So I made my dad. First I made my little brother. Well, he was in 6th grade at the time. I made him a Thomas Jefferson suit with a big frill in the front and a trim. And my dad wanted one so bad I made one for him. He was so excited. And then I wanted to make the George Washington suit too. So a guy friend of mine wanted it. So I said, yeah, buy the stuff, I'll make it for you. And so I made him a George Washington suit. Got out of hand a little bit. There was a lot of costuming going on that year. At the shop, and that again wasn't the 70s, it was the 90s, but when I first started working at that shop, we made this giant United States flag. It was going to the University of Minnesota, and it was like 80 feet. It was 25% the size of a football field.
What were some popular activities?
I always went to the Saturday night dances here up at the church, and Faye Messenger, he was the gatekeeper. He was the guy that let you in or not in, because you had to be, you had to make sure you were going to behave yourself if you were going to be let in. And so there was that. And after, and then when I got to college, there was all this, the other college level, but kind of the same thing. Yeah, I had fun with my cousins when I was a kid, still do. We, like quarterly, like every 3rd month or something, we get together. We call it the Cousins Lunch, and we'll meet. Most of us are still here in the valley, and somebody will pick a place, and we'll go have lunch together. Spend an hour and a half picking up some poor waitress's table, yakking about being kids and grandma's house, and when I was a kid, I would go up and hang out. I like to go to my cousin's house because they lived next door to my grandma. I have never lived anywhere but this valley. My parents moved when I started 1st grade, they moved into the house they were still living in 50 years later when we had to move into assisted living.
Wow.
And I've just never lived anywhere.
That's
I would
impressive.
like to have tried something somewhere. I lived ever so briefly in Caldwell a couple times in my life, but really, I've always lived in the valley here. And I was 50 years old or almost 50 before I ever went anywhere on an airplane. My kids got tired of me complaining about never being on an airplane, so they got together and bought us this little weekend trip to Seattle. So I'd shut up.
Do you have any favorite memories from the 70s?
Well, I'll tell you, the first day of school in 1971, that was the first day of my junior year of high school. First period, it's being taught, it's algebra, and I look over and there's this new boy. It's a big school. It was Boise High School. It's a big enough school, but I look over and I see this new boy, and I go, damn, he's cute. Too bad I haven't seen him, he doesn't go to my church. And then a few days, short time later, I saw him at some church activity and go, well, that's nice. And, that's scary. We didn't date until we got to college. We dated for a year, and then he was gone for 2 years for his mission, and then then we got married 3 months after he got back. He's cute, but that was about all it was in high school. Wow. No, we were not high school sweethearts. I knew who he was, but he remembers about me from that time was the date. I hated my glasses. I wanted new ones, and I hated them. And my mom said, no, these are okay. And so I would take them off, and I would put them in my pocket. After I drove to church, and I'd take them off and put them in my pocket because I didn't want to be seen in them, and I'd put them in my coat pocket. And there was a hole in my coat pocket, so they fell out and they got run over by a car before I discovered it. So I had it, and so a couple of days I was without glasses at school. And so in this algebra class, I always sat towards the back and I'm sitting there squinting, couldn't see the chalkboard, and the teacher had enough of that. So he took one bus all the way up to the chalkboard and made me sit in for the rest of the day. And that's the thing that Gary remembers about me. That's what he says he remembers that. Well, he was going to Boise State. I was going to Boise State. First semester, there's lots of new people. I dated a new guy every week that first month. Fresh meat, And Karyl was one of them, and he's somebody I was really comfortable with. We actually went to a concert one time, and I think it was the Carpenters or something, and it was just always really, really comfortable with him. And so that was one reason it would keep going, because I never felt uncomfortable around him.
What was the style like back in the 70s?
A lot of dresses were just simple A-line stuff, It was just after the 60s with go-go girls, and, just straight, because everybody was really skinny, and I was extremely skinny at the time. So just like an A-line dress. And most of the girls wore really, really short dresses. My mom would not have allowed it, and I was not inclined to argue with her about it. My dresses were never any shorter than 2 inches above my knee. We would measure them, which is kind of hard because it's so ticklish. And my mom would try to measure and pin up above my knee, and I'm trying to hold still because I'm laughing because I'm so ticklish. But when I was in high school, I had a strong desire, and I bought myself a pair of farmer-style overalls that I would wear around the house up to the hills or something. And styles were pretty simple at the time. And it was usually dresses instead of skirts and tops. And that was when I was learning to sew. So it was a good thing the styles were simple, because then I could make something for myself. I think I wore a lot of blue. It was a favorite of mine. There's one dress I'm thinking of right now, blue and green floral. And I had a tan-colored corduroy jumper that I'd made. Yellow was a fairly popular color at the time, but I just don't like wearing yellow, never have.
What made you happy back in the 70s?
Home and family. And like I said, the most important things to me in my life are my faith and my family. They were always really important to me, and it was never hard for me to stick with the way my parents raised us. I'm still living exactly the way my parents raised us, and it wasn't one of my older brothers who stepped away from all of that decades ago. Mm-hmm. It says that I only did that because I didn't know any better. Because mom and dad never allowed anything different, and I didn't know any better. And I thought, no, it's because that's who I am. That's the way I roll.
Were you ever scared, unhappy, or anxious?
Of course, I was a teenager. Yes, I was. Every teenager is going to be unhappy, anxious and all that. Because you're a teenager, and generally I was I was a really happy, upbeat person. And one thing was that I was often left out. If somebody was going to get left out of something, it was always me. But looking back, I'm really actually pretty glad for that. I didn't get invited to this or to that, and right now I'm actually really glad that I was the wallflower, and I was safe. Looking back now, I'm really glad I wasn't getting into the stuff they were getting into. I'm safe and I'm healthy.
How would you compare your childhood or teenage years to today's kids?
Well, I don't think one is worse or better than the other. They're just different. People complain about the kids of today. They're too entitled or spoiled. And I'm thinking, there were spoiled, entitled kids. I went to high school with them. They were. It's just that I don't think one is worse or better than the other. They had different technologies. It's just the most miraculous thing to me still that I got this phone I'm talking to you in. I carry that in my pocket, and I can access virtually anything in the whole world with this little piece of plastic in my pocket. It's amazing. Back in the 70s, cassette recorders were the hot thing. Those were amazing technology at the time, so it's just different.
What brings you peace or calmness during hard times?
Well, I think I'm generally a pretty positive person by nature, and keeping me happy has been really easy, like postpartum or anything, if I'm having a hard day, good deep breath, a nap, and a trip to the fabric store and a Dr. Pepper are going to set me up just fine. I've been so blessed. I've had good health, and when I was delivering babies, I didn't have the serious postpartum that some people get. I've just been so amazingly lucky.
So Karyl, in that last bit, I think takeaway I have is what brings her peace is being grateful. She is grateful for her life and the things that have happened and has no complaints, and is looking, her answer was focused on the positives, and that's not always the case with most of us, but I thought that was pretty cool. I do think right now it's great to look at what we're grateful for and what we have and hope for a better future, hopefully very soon. So thank you, Karyl. It was a pleasure to interview you. I'm really excited for the next upcoming interviews, so look forward to those. Yeah, with that, have a great week. Reach out to me if you need someone to talk to. I am here just chilling. All right, have a great week. I will talk to you next time. Bye. Wait. You can't miss the embarrassing story of the week. No. Okay. It's that time. It's Steph with an F's embarrassing story of the week. Well, it's hard to have embarrassing stories when you don't really go out anywhere or do much. So I will say the one embarrassing thing that comes to mind this week is everyone's hair. Of course, hairdressers are not open, at least to my knowledge, and we're trying to avoid things and places. And so personally, my hair is at the worst it has been in a long time, and that's fine. I will wait. But the rest of us have been wanting to trim Zeke, my son's hair. He's almost 2 years old, and his hair is very fluffy and out of control. My husband got the razor out, which is a one razor. I may be saying this wrong, which is very short, and he managed to cut right behind the ear and do a little C curve, which then meant we had to cut his hair because I can't just stare at the C curve every day. I can't do it. And so, yes, long story short, my son has a mohawk. I cannot lie, it's not my favorite, but everyone else thinks it's hilarious and they love it. And is it embarrassing that I just can't stand behind it? And I'm not loving it. I love him very much, and he is so cute and looks like he's up to no good right now. But sweet little boy now has a mohawk. And that is my embarrassing story. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I will talk to you soon. Bye.
If you came here for mental health help, please go visit your doctor. If you're looking for some mental health tips, Dr. Daniel Amen is someone I follow. I love what he has to say and offer. I think his website is brainhealthassessment.com, and he just has some awesome checklist items that go over brain health habits that you should be doing to have better brain health. I want to say there's like 5 to 10 items, and if you have those, if you're working on those habits and trying to improve them to improve your brain health, you'll also improve your happiness level, because brain health equals mental health. So keep your brains happy and healthy, and check out Dr. Daniel Amen. This is not sponsored. I just really like what he has to say, and I think it's really beneficial. I think it can help a lot of people. It's actually very matter of fact, kind of obvious, but yeah, we neglect so many of these habits daily, and I do feel like if you're feeling unhappy, that may be one of the reasons you're unhappy, because you're neglecting your brain health, which is also your mental health. And yeah, trying to improve these habits could really help. So check him out. If you have any stories from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, please get in contact with me. Let's chat. I want nothing more than to chat about the past. I want nothing more than to chat about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you have any specific questions that I'm not asking that you would like to know about these eras while interviewing these people, please let me know. I would love some advice, and I would love your input. So what would you guys like to know?